It's Will. Welcome back. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. If you're new to the channel and you feel like subscribing, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. I'm really excited today. I'm really excited because I get to talk to you about what is my new favorite movie. And like, obviously there's a little bit of hyperbole there, but this movie was obscenely entertaining, ridiculous, and incredible. It's Duel to the Death. It was released in 1983 and it was directed by... I didn't want to get this wrong because his name is tricky for me, not being able to speak the language. Xing Sui Tong, and it stars Damien Lau, it stars Norman Chu, and it stars Flora Chong Lin, among with many others who you'll recognize if you've seen a lot of these films. Like Eddie Ko is in it, who was in Lethal Weapon 4, who was in Hero Shit No Tears, of Shaw Brothers movies and stuff like that. And so this is a 2K remaster that's being released by Eureka, which is a UK company, so it's a Region B Blu-ray, and it's coming out September 20th of 2021. This is a must-have. The first 2,000 have the slipcase, and they have the booklet. The booklet is great. It's 17 pages long. It has a reprint of Frank Zheng's original liner notes for the Tai Seng release of this film, and it has a James Oliver essay, and those do a great job of like contextualizing the film, analyzing the film, pointing out why it's a great film and a kind of an underappreciated film and stuff like that. This is like a widely loved movie. I actually have some quotes here that I wrote down. Let me read this to you. An undisputed masterpiece according to Asian Movie Pulse. A terrifically entertaining 80s B movie according to Time Out. Wildly entertaining according to Love HK Film. It features among Time Out's top 10 wuxia films made in Hong Kong and Time Out's top 10 best action movies, or top 100 action movies of all time. Frank Zheng has also called this movie a masterpiece, and I would call it a masterpiece, and not in the sense that, like, you know, masterpiece is a relative word. It's not a masterpiece in the sense that, like, I don't know, Apocalypse Now or like one of these movies is a masterpiece, right? It is a masterpiece in its own right because its aesthetic is so insane, its vision is so insane, and it achieves all of that through just mad insanity. And it's like a masterpiece of just what is going on. So let me I'm going to give you really briefly a couple of bits of information about why this movie blew my mind. Then I'm going to review the Blu-ray, and then I'm going to give you a couple more of my own thoughts at the end. This movie has exploding ninjas. Flying ninjas. A naked ninja. It has a parakeet whose name is Chicken who talks shit on people. I can't even say it without laughing. There is a scene in this movie that I think is legit the best death scene I have ever seen. A guy gets decapitated. His head gets impaled on a tree branch. He talks to someone, and then his head explodes. It's just like, what is happening? In every scene in this movie, you're like, people are getting their limbs cut off. Someone gets all their fingers cut off. It's like, what is going on? It is amazing. But it's like, it manages to be like a relatively straightforward kind of like old school martial arts film, while also at the same time being this just batshit, like, it almost reminds me of like Black Lizard or like Bat Without Wings. You know, there are those like Shaw Brothers films that have those just like insane supernatural elements, and it's like kind of a mystery, and you like don't really know what's going on and what's real and what's like trickery, and like it has that element to it, but it also has an element of just kind of being a straightforward martial arts film, and it achieves both of these really well. And I think that's a really incredible feat. The performances are great. It was shot in both Hong Kong and Korea, and the locations are incredible, like the Korean temple and the countryside, but then the sets are really phenomenal too. If you're a fan of old school martial arts movies, if you love like B movies where you're watching it like the Andy Sidaris type movie, like this is not, you know, this is very different from Andy Sidaris, but it has that same sense of like, you're like, oh, action movie, wait, what's happening? I don't understand. like that level of insanity. Where almost in every single scene, you're like, there's a scene where these guys are at a graveyard and the graves start blowing up. And it's like, what's happening? But it's all explained and it all makes sense in the context of the logic of the film. And it's just insane. So, I've explained enough about the insanity of this movie. Let me give you a brief synopsis of the plot. I'll review the Blu-ray, and then I'll give you one or two more thoughts. I'll be out of here. So the plot is basically that you have this kind of duel that happens every 10 years where the best swordsmen in China and the best swordsmen in Japan are chosen from their respective countries, and they get together and they fight. And so you follow both the Japanese character and the Chinese character, the Chinese guy comes from Shaolin Temple, and you have all that, and the Japanese guy's from the Shingaki sect. And so, like Bushido, Way of the Warrior, the Samurai, and stuff like that. And it does a really good job of giving agency and empathy and compassion to both of these characters and showing their journey. But there are some nefarious elements in play who want to use the duel to achieve nefarious kind of alternate goals. And so that's where the insanity comes into play. And I'll just leave it at that. This is a really great Blu-ray release. I'm really happy to have this, and it has a lot of great features on it. It has a commentary by Frank Zhang. I love Frank Zhang. If you watch this channel, you probably like Frank too at this point. If you watch his commentaries, this commentary is... I feel like he had so much information for this commentary, he almost overwhelmed himself because he's speaking so fast that they were trying to pause it and be like, whoa, Frank, dude, you need to calm down. Like, I got to write this shit down so I can remember it. But he does, like, as always, there's just such an incredible job of, like, this scene was shot here, this scene was shot here. He does a really incredible analysis of the continuity in this film, which is really difficult because they shot so many exteriors in Korea. And they shot the interiors on sets in Golden Harvest Studio in Hong Kong. And he actually talks about why that is, like why a lot of Golden Harvest movies were shot abroad and they did interiors on sets, and like why that was, what the setup of Golden Harvest in their studio at the time. And that it's really interesting to hear that because I didn't really think about that at all. But his analysis is really fascinating because you're watching, like, this scene is inside and then someone walks out of the building and you're like, now they're in Korea. Like, that was in Hong Kong. Now they're in Korea, but everything matches. And, like, in every shot where that happens, Frank walks you through, like, what's going on. It's really fascinating. As always, he brings a lot of insight into the characters and, like, the filmmaking techniques. Like, the camera's doing this in this scene, and you can see the camera shaking here, which means that, like, the ninjas were probably jumping on the platform where the camera was. It's one of those movies. The ninjas are jumping on the platform. And, like, in all the interviews and in Frank's commentary, everyone talks about how innovative the filmmaking techniques are, like the wire fu, use of trampolines for these big jumps, really fast editing. In one of the interviews, the actor talks about how, like, an ordinary director would do one shot of a move, and this director would take 5 shots of the move and then edit them together so you see every single aspect of that martial arts move, but really quickly, so it like almost goes by so you don't notice it, but you do know that you're seeing it in the back of your mind. It's really interesting the way that everyone talks about his technique and how it was really innovative and how people today are still using those techniques. And this was his first film, so this is where all of that kind of came together. And so the thing that like was really incredible to me about Frank's commentary is that he talks about the TV wars. A lot of the people who are involved in this film, so the director, the writers, like the actors, like all those people, came from Hong Kong television. I know very, very little about Hong Kong TV, but I know that it has a big interaction with an influence on the film industry. So it was really fascinating to learn all this stuff about Hong Kong TV in like the 60s and 70s and 80s and all the shows these people were involved in and how the networks were like battling with each other and which networks existed and then the names of the networks changed over time and what kind of shows they were doing and like adaptations of martial arts novels and how martial arts novels influence television and film in Hong Kong, and this film in particular. It's just incredible information. And again, I know very little about TV in Hong Kong, but from what I've learned, I know that it's very important upon the film industry, and I would love to see those shows and to have access to more information about that. I don't even know where to find it. If you're watching and you know that information, drop in the comments maybe like where can I see some of these TVB and ATV shows or RTV shows, and where can I like read more about the history of these things, because Frank's commentary track like really whet my appetite for wanting to know more about this. So there are 3 interviews on here. One is with Norman Chu, the actor who's in the film. That's an archival interview, so that's like an older interview that was put on here. That's 19 minutes long. There's an interview with Flora, who plays the female lead in the movie. That's 9 or 10 minutes long. And then Manfred Wong, the screenwriter, there's a 32-minute interview with him. So he again touches upon a lot of that TV stuff and how he got in. Like, he was in college studying communications and he was offered a job for like one of the first like full-time paid scripting jobs for a TV, because they used to be freelance TV writers in Hong Kong, and they would get paid to like write up brief ideas or gags or like write outlines of novels that could be used for scripts and stuff. And so a new network came along that actually hired a writer's room in a scripting department, and he was hired while he was still in college, and he was like, should I finish college? And like, if I'm studying communications, I'll probably work in radio or TV anyway. Like, I should just take this job. So he was really young, working in TV, and then he met the director of this film, and he talked about how the director was actually really difficult to work with because he knew that he wanted something, but he couldn't articulate it what it was, so he would never tell you. So they worked for a year on this script, and the director's apartment was right across the street from the studio, the TV studio. So they would go over at night after working during the day and work on the script. And it's really interesting, like the process he explains of like working with the director and how he was offered to actually write his next film, but he declined. And he talked about his whole career. It's like really interesting to learn about these things. To me, especially me being a writer and like, seeing that perspective, because a lot of what we hear about is the filmmakers and the actors in the West. We don't learn as much about the screenwriters and stuff like that. So his perspective was really interesting to me. Norman Chu, the actor, his interview was great. He talks about how he was an accountant and someone was like, "You're handsome, you should be an actor." And he was like, "Okay." So he did like a training. He signed up for a training course that was through TVB and Shaw. And he said he explains the training course is crazy, like horseback riding, sword fighting, like all this stuff. It's really cool. And then he was given a choice at the end of it. Do you want to do Shaw or do you want to do TV? And he decided movies, so he went with Shaw Brothers. And it's just a really cool interview. And he talks a lot about this film, and he seems to have a really good memory of it. And like where they shot different things and how it was shot. And like there's one shot in particular where he was worried that like all these people were gonna die. So that's really interesting to learn, especially after you've watched the film. And it's just like a lot of insight into the making of the film. And then Flora's interview is she was a ballet dancer. Like she has a degree in ballet from London, and I think she was a professional ballet dancer in London. She studied opera in Paris and has like all this classical training. And then there was some kind of beauty pageant on TV. And there's like I guess there was like a talent section of the beauty pageant where they would have someone come in and perform who wasn't like participating in the beauty pageant or something. I don't exactly understand the full context of it, but her dad knew the person who ran TVB, and like she just knew all these people, and they were all like, "We need a talent person." Like this, she said this was on a Thursday, and the show was airing live on Saturday. They're like, "We need a talent person," and they're like, "Oh, Flora could do it. She can dance, she can sing." So they're like, "Will you do this?" And she was like, "Okay," and she was like kind of young at the time, and she did it. And she said that weekend she got 20 movie offers. She did 10 movies in a year. And that was like, she just burnt out on it. It's really interesting to hear her describe the movie industry and she loved doing this movie. She has a lot of great memories of it and all the things she learned on it working with the director. And like, she talks about how it empowered her as an actor and as an individual and all this stuff. And as a woman, it's really interesting. So definitely great interviews on here to check out. There are also 2 stills galleries that are incredible, like really high resolution production images that it's really cool stuff. And I highly recommend checking those out because that's the kind of thing where I think it would be easy to skip on a Blu-ray, because if you watched all the video content, you're like, okay, I'm done with this. But definitely check out those stills gallery because there's some really cool production photographs where you can see kind of like, there's a couple shots where there's like low angle. You can kind of see like the edges of the lighting rigs. Like you can kind of see what the set was and how they were shooting in it and stuff like that. It's really cool and really interesting. I'm just looking at my kind of list here to make sure I'm not leaving anything out. The trailer is on here. And there's alternate English credits too, so watch those if you feel up for it. And so I'm just going to give you like 1 or 2 more impressions about this film. One of the things that I found fascinating about this movie is that it's, the guy, the Chinese swordsman is from Shaolin Temple, and there's a lot of philosophy in this film. There's like Shaolin philosophy of like Buddhism and peacefulness and how like it's not worth fighting a duel, or is it? What are you trying to do? Are you fighting yourself, or are you fighting the other person? Are you challenging who you are, or are you trying to destroy someone else? And like there's these Buddhist monks who are advising this guy, and it's a really interesting philosophical debate. And then in Japan you have that kind of Japanese philosophy of like, even if Buddha is on the battlefield, strike him down and then kill your opponent. Nothing is more important than victory. Loyalty to Japan, loyalty to your martial arts school, loyalty to the shogun. And that Japanese philosophy weighs really heavily, kind of like the martial Japanese philosophy of like, Musashi Miyamoto and like all that stuff, right? And that kind of weighs heavily. And there's like this really interesting scene where the Chinese character and the Japanese character are talking about cherry blossoms, which in Japan is representative of, they feel, of their national character. And then the is it plum blossoms in China? It's there's like a painting that they're looking at, they're talking about it, and the philosophy of it is really interesting, and it ends up being kind of a movie about the pointlessness of violence and how friendship and peace and love and like falling in love with people and becoming friends and having that kind of love for people and understanding people across cultural barriers and stuff like that is far more valuable than trying to prove that you're a better fighter or something. Like it ends up being kind of it's a dark movie, but obviously it's a crazy, insane ninja B movie, so it's not too dark. But it does have kind of a dark pall over it. But it's ultimately, I think, a film about kind of the pointlessness of the desire for violence and revenge and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting movie from a philosophical perspective, while also just being insanely entertaining for the fights and the ninja insanity. So the movie is Duel to the Death. I highly recommend this. This is definitely like a top 10 film that for me that I have seen like for the first time, because I'd never seen this movie before, since starting this channel. I'm so happy to have seen it and to have this edition. I highly recommend you go out and get it. Get it with the limited edition of 2000 so you can get those extra liner notes from Frank and James Oliver and the slipcase and everything like that. And so there you go. Let me know what you think about this movie in the comments. I'm Will. This is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.